Hey guys, welcome back to Day-Today Chess. After a short break for Christmas, I really hope all of you had a wonderful Christmas if you're celebrating it, or Hanukkah if you are celebrating Hanukkah, or any other holidays that might have been during this time or will be at this time of year. I apologize for not being familiar with all of them. Please feel free to share them with me. I'm always trying to find out as many things as I can about other cultures and their traditions for a certain time of year. So I would be very happy to read about your traditions in the comments below. So I'm back today with the Season Up Your Sunday Endgame Study Explained, and I chose an endgame by Horwitz. Unfortunately, I do not know in which year this study was created, but it is one of those positions that it's very good to know because it's Bishop Endgame. Here's the position that I chose for you today, and I really hope you're going to try to solve it before checking out the video. Why is it such an important position? Well, because there is a big chance that we can get a similar position with the pawn up in a same color bishop endgame, and we might not know exactly what is it that we have to do to win. And so that's why this position is very good. It's going to benefit us a lot as we play chess, because there are chances we could get something similar. Obviously not this exact position, but we could get something similar and get some ideas of what we should and should not do. So with that said, we are going to start analyzing together this position. So be sure to pause the video if you want to solve it by yourself at first. Okay, so we look at this position and we see that Black's king is kind of, trapped in h7. The pawn is controlling g7 and the bishop is controlling g8. So this is very important. Why? Because we don't want the king to get close to our pawn. Now, the other thing that we notice, and that's already very obvious when we see that it's the same color bishop, is that we cannot push f7 because Black obviously is just going to give the bishop for the pawn, and with the bishop up, unfortunately, we cannot win the game. So obviously we cannot play f7 that easily, so we really need to find a way to push that pawn towards the promotion. Now, not only that, because let's say this bishop goes away and we push f7, then we have to be cautious because Black can play king g7, put their king in f8, blockade our pawn, and then, they'll find a way to give away their bishop for the pawn, and goodbye win for White. So it's really, really important to know what it is that you want to do here with White in order to try to win this position. So with those things said, we normally encounter some positions where the king, White's king, is really, let's say, in e7. And if we had that position, it would probably be quite easy for White to win, because what do we have to do? Well, we have to make sure that we're trading the bishops. And with the bishop, with the king already in e7, what we're going to do is try to trade this bishop by playing bishop f7. But that wouldn't be as easy either, because look, there are two diagonals, right, on which this pawn can be stopped. The h5 e8 diagonal, but also the a2 g8 diagonal. So would it really be that easy for White to win the position if they had the king in e7? Well, not as simple, because when we play bishop f7 to trade the bishop, Black would just move the bishop somewhere, staying on, the b1 h7 diagonal, and whenever we'll get with the bishop out from in front of our pawn, right, because staying in front is not going to help us push, whenever we'll go out, let's say we stay, now we say, oh, we want this diagonal, so we'll move bishop e8, well then, Black, from wherever they had moved their bishop, far away from the king, let's say they will play bishop c4, and now they're stopping our pawn in f7. So that's why, that wouldn't be that easy either. So what we would have to do is we would have to make sure with the king in e7, after we took away white's bishop, well, if we did that, let's say, and we had him come on this a to b8 diagonal, what we have to do is switch the trade square. So we don't want to trade the bishop in front of our pawn, but we want to trade the bishop somehow on the side. So we would want to play some bishop g7, bishop e6, trade that bishop, then play back king e7 and push the pawn. And during all this time, we need to make sure black's king is not going to get in front of the pawn and make a draw. So this is kind of how it happens in theory. And there's another thing that I wanted to tell you, is that if you get with your king to e7 with white, you don't need to play bishop f7. You can just play bishop b5 and trade the bishop in e8. That's another good spot for the trade. But the idea is for you to remember, sometimes you might have to offer the trade first in front of your pawn to make your opponent's bishop, you know, move from one diagonal to another. But after that, you need to make sure that the offering of the trade happens on another square that's close to the pawn, so the king is close, to make sure it helps the promotion of the pawn, but to make sure it's not in front of the pawn. So I hope my explanations didn't confuse you too much and they gave you an idea of how we normally want to win pawn bishop versus just a bishop, okay, when the bishops are of course of the same color. We're talking the same color, obviously opposite color bishops endgames just with one pawn up, like just one pawn and bishop versus bishop, is going to be a draw. But here, since we have the same color bishop, we really need to utilize that and try to find a way to trade the bishop. Now keep in mind, there are other ways to trade this bishop too, like we can think of some bishop e6, bishop f5 and trade the bishop in f5. That's another possibility, but what we have to be very cautious about is that black, like I said earlier, is not going to get their king in front of the pawn and make a draw. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now, how do you guys think we're gonna do all this? It sounds easy in theory, but in practice, can we really go king f4? We could, but if we go king f4, the problem is black is going to escape with their king. You notice the king in g5 was keeping black's king stuck there as well from this side. I mentioned the g7 and g8 controlled by the pawn and the bishop, but these two squares were controlled by the king. So as we're trying to make a circle this way, black is going to try to come the other way around. So now when we go king e5, black goes here, we go king e6, and now black is going to play king f4. And when you go to e7, finally made it. I also finally made it in e5, and now it's impossible for white to find a way to get this bishop away from here, because anytime white will be playing bishop f7, I will just go far away, and then, you know, there, on whichever diagonal you move, you can't move somewhere to control both of these diagonals, e8, h5, and a2, g8. You can't possibly be on any other square than f7, and f7 is not the right square because you want to push the pawn. So wherever white is going to move their bishop, black is going to go on the other diagonal and just make a draw. So the only other possibility would be, given that this diagonal is not very long and we're already controlling two squares, we can think, oh, I can play bishop e2, control this square, and black is in Zugzwang. But is he really in Zugzwang? Well, he cannot move the king, right? Because if you'd play king f5, we'd be super happy. Just check, win the bishop, and then push the pawn. And black has to kind of try to keep the king to attack this pawn so that it doesn't allow white to move their king. But the thing is, we can play bishop... Oops, I'm sorry. Definitely not that move. We can play bishop e8. And the problem is, you can't control... You actually don't control the e8 square, because you'll never be able to actually take my bishop because king takes f6 and draw. So that is the reason why the natural way of trying to win this would not work. So white has to find some more dynamic kind of approach. And what is the approach that Horwitz came up with in this position? Well, I'm sure when this position was created, it was created for a good reason, right? For us to solve. So bishop g8 check is the correct answer. Why is this the correct answer? We're going to see in a moment. So obviously black cannot take the bishop, and I really hope all of you are familiar with king pawn endgames and how this position is so lost for black, because if you go to f8 we just push and king g7 and promote. So that's for kids, right? And of course if black comes to h8, we are not going to be childish and play f7 and offer him or her a draw, because obviously this is a stalemate, but of course we're going to play king f7 and then king e7 and push the pawn towards promotion. So pretty simple, right? So obviously black is not going to capture in g8, but they will play king h8. This is the only other alternative to this move. And in this position, white has to find a good move to win the game, and that good move is bishop e6. So here, black again doesn't have many options. One of their options is to play king h7, and the other option is to play just bishop e8 to keep their bishop on the diagonal, right? And the last option, I guess, would be to move their bishop somewhere on this diagonal, like maybe bishop d3 or bishop c2. Just move the bishop on this diagonal, because we have to remember white cannot push f7 just yet, because black would make a draw after king g7, king f8. There's no way to take black out from that square. So okay, so let's just start with the easiest alternative, and that is king h7. And this move loses immediately. Why? Because bishop f5. And what we have achieved from the starting position, well, our bishop was in c4, so we couldn't just play bishop d3 to try to trade the bishop. But now after check and coming to e6, we have improved the position of our bishop, and now we can afford to play bishop f5, trade the bishops, and win the king pawn endgame. I hope it's quite clear for everybody. When you go king g8, we can go king e6 and go for the queen. Okay, let's check the other alternative, bishop d3. Bishop d3 is basically, like I said, we cannot play f7, but we made sure the king is a little bit further than the previous line. So now black is stuck there, cannot come to g7 or g8. So now we have to improve the position of our king, bring it to e7. That's basically the story that I told you as we started this position. And now black goes bishop e5, right, to try to bring the bishop to e8. Now we go king e5. They go to e8, king d6. So this basically happens when black doesn't do that much, and we got to e7 on time. Black is really far from actually keeping our pawn attacked. And now if they go king g6, it's important to consider, because if black just moves the bishop here, for example, we go bishop d7, followed by bishop e8, trade the bishops, and push the pawn towards promotion. But black can play king g6 because we cannot take the bishop. We're gonna make a draw. Luckily, we have a nice winning move. When the king is in g6, just remember this idea. The king is in g6. That bishop doesn't have moves on the diagonal besides f7. So now I play bishop d7. Because obviously, if they take, we're promoting. And if they play bishop f7, what do? Bishop f5 check. Trade the bishops and win the endgame. And if they don't move the bishop, they can't move the king, but the reason we play bishop d7 is to capture that bishop with the bishop. So white is winning. Very, very important to remember that. Now I want to go a little bit back to king f4. What if black doesn't just come with the bishop, like he just lost so much time? What if he just plays king h7 to bring their king much faster? Well, I think it's quite obvious. Simple check here is going to win the game. What if he plays first bishop b5, we go to e5, and now there's no more check bishop f5, so why can't he play now king h7? Of course he can, but we go king d6, and if they play king g6, Now we play f7. And when you go king g7 to stop my pawn, king e7. So there are other ways for black to actually try to make a draw, but they don't really work. So it's time to go back to the main line. After bishop e6, let's say black just stays playing bishop e8. Here we can just bring our king. It's the same pattern as we saw earlier. We want to bring our king towards e7. But now, compared to the other line, black is a little bit faster. They didn't make all the circle to bring their bishop back to e8. They just brought it there immediately, and now the king is coming towards the pawn. But there's no need to worry, because we are not going to go king e5. I mean, there's no point. We just want to get to e7. There's no point to make a circle. So what white is doing here is moving the bishop first to try to bring their king that way. And so if black just stays king h6, now we go king e6. The king comes to g5, our king goes to e7. You have to move the bishop because you don't really have that many options here with black. King f5 is not going to help you very much because we just have bishop f7, making your bishop go away somewhere, and now check and pushing the pawn. So after king e7, bishop h5, still going for the trade. The bishop comes somewhere, right? Now we go again. In this position we go bishop e8, bishop c4, right? And now bishop d7. Black has to make a move. Let's say they play king g6 in this position, and now we're trading the bishop. No other move of black would have helped him because bishop e6 is still a threat, and there's no way to get the bishop on this diagonal. So this was basically the position, you guys. I tried to cover as many of the lines of blacks. I really hope you enjoyed this position. As for the last endgame study of the year, for next year, because it's going to be 100-year anniversary of Paul Keres, I'm going to be sure to show some very nice positions that he has created, but not only that, but also we'll be looking a little bit at his personal chess games of his personal chess career. So that's all I have, and since it's the last day, I thought I'd make it a little bit more fun. So I've prepared also a nice another very nice endgame by Horwitz. I don't know how I got to these positions, but somehow, you know, in my finding material for my students, I just came across them and I thought I should really show them to you. So here is the position that I'll just be giving you as a bonus. I won't explain it. I'll just let you go with this position. It is white to move and try to find a win. That's all, folks. My next videos are going to be focused on catching up the work that I should have done last week. But also Qatar Masters is taking place these days. There are a couple more games, so I'll be sure to make some nice summary of the tournament and some really, of course, beautiful games and tactics that happened. Stay tuned for more like usually tomorrow. Have a great week and stay warm. Bye.